John had never traveled beyond Earth before. He had won a mysterious lottery from a private company promising a once-in-a-lifetime cultural experience on Letheria, the most beautiful planet in the galaxy. At first, he thought it was a scam, but the shimmering ticket in his hand and the government clearance forms confirmed it was real. He had no idea what awaited him, but he had always been curious about the stars, about alien worlds, and about life beyond the blue dot he called home. The spacecraft descended through the planet's thick emerald atmosphere, and John pressed his face against the window. Letheria was unlike anything he had ever imagined. Mountains floated mid-air, glowing faintly with a light of their own. Rivers shimmered with colors that defied earthly names, and huge forests of tall crystalline trees stretched across the landscape. The sky was a soft pale green, and clouds swirled like gentle brushstrokes. A small part of John wanted to pinch himself. It had to be a dream. The landing was smooth, almost silent. As the doors opened, a wave of warm, scented air greeted him. It smelled faintly of flowers, metal, and something sweet he couldn't identify. The Litherians who came forward to greet the guests were stunning. Their skin gleamed like polished metals, gold, silver, and deep blues. Their eyes were larger than humans, reflecting light in ways John couldn't describe. Every movement they made was fluid, precise, and elegant. John felt small, fragile, and completely out of place in his plain human suit. He was handed a small device that translated their language into English. He learned that he was attending a royal wedding, a celebration of peace between two powerful Letherian families. John had expected something like a cultural exhibition, maybe a short ceremony, and then a tour of the city. Instead, he found himself in a massive hall, stretching higher than any building on Earth. The ceiling sparkled like a night sky, with tiny floating lights that shifted like living stars. The floor reflected everything perfectly, and the guests' faces shimmered in the soft glow. The music was unlike anything he had heard. A mixture of notes that seemed to vibrate, not just in the air but inside his chest. John's nerves started to settle as he walked along the rows of alien nobles, bowing politely as the etiquette app on his device instructed. He felt like a museum exhibit humanity in flesh, placed among beings that were centuries ahead in grace, culture, and perhaps intelligence. He tried to smile, tried to blend in, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was completely alone here. Then, the crowd fell silent. A hush spread through the hall like a tide. John turned toward the source, expecting the bride and groom to appear. Instead, a figure emerged, a towering Letherian with skin shining like polished bronze, eyes glowing like twin suns, and a presence that seemed to bend the room around him. The king, the weight of the entire planet seemed to rest on his shoulders. He walked slowly, deliberately, until all eyes were on John. John's stomach dropped. The king stopped a few steps away and fixed him with a gaze so intense it felt like fire. "You," the king's voice boomed, deep and resonant, "will stand beside my daughter as the groom." The words echoed through the hall. John blinked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Surely this was a mistake. He had come as a guest, not a participant. He was just a human, a visitor, a curious observer. But the Litherians were silent, their eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to respond. The bride, standing behind the king, looked at him with an unreadable expression, calm and curious, her skin shimmering like molten silver. John's heart raced. He wanted to speak, to explain, to beg, but nothing came out. The world seemed to tilt. The floating lanterns glimmered around him. The music faded into a soft hum, leaving only the sound of his own frantic heartbeat. How had he, a mere human, become the center of a royal Letherian wedding? The moment felt like a dream, surreal and impossible, but the king's hand resting lightly on John's shoulder told him it was very real indeed. For the first time in his life, John realized he was not just a visitor. He was part of something far larger than himself, something beautiful, terrifying, and completely alien. And there was no turning back. John's mind raced, but his body refused to move. He had imagined many things about this trip, but being told he was the groom at an alien royal wedding was far beyond anything he could have expected. His hands trembled slightly, and he swallowed hard, feeling the eyes of the entire court on him. The Litherians were silent, their glowing eyes locked on him with patient curiosity, their anticipation almost physical. John wanted to run, to disappear, to find the nearest exit, but there was no escape. The bride, Solara, looked at him without a trace of panic. Her expression was serene, almost unreadable, but something in her gaze made him hesitate. There was no malice there, no judgment, just a quiet attention that felt strangely comforting amid the chaos of his thoughts. He tried to speak, to explain, but words failed him. I think there's been a mistake," he stammered. His voice sounded weak even to his own ears. The king's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in an intensity that made the air itself seem heavier. "This is no mistake," the king said, his voice resonating through the hall. "The stars have chosen you. You will stand beside my daughter." John felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. Stars had chosen him? He was an ordinary human, a traveler, a nobody. How could he possibly meet the expectations of an entire alien civilization, let alone marry a princess? Panic surged through him, but he tried to force himself to stay composed. He looked around, hoping for anyone to intervene, to clarify the misunderstanding. But no one did. Every Lithirian bowed slightly in acknowledgement of the king's decree. The weight of centuries-old tradition pressed down on him like a physical force. He turned to Solara, desperate for guidance, and found her studying him with quiet curiosity. She was stunning beyond words, her skin shining like liquid silver, her hair flowing with colors he had no name for. But beyond her beauty, there was something else, something like calm intelligence, like she understood the fear thrumming inside him. "It is unusual," she said softly, her voice translated through his device, "but the king's will is not to be questioned." John's mind whirled. He had not come here to change history, to fulfill destiny, or to lead anything. He had come as a guest, a curious human wanting to witness alien culture. Now he was expected to represent his species, to honor their traditions, to stand as the groom for a princess who had lived her entire life in a world completely unlike his own. The enormity of it made his chest tighten. Could he even do it? Could a human, so small and fragile, truly fit into a role designed for beings centuries more advanced than him? The king stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Your courage is not required yet," he said, and John felt the subtle shift of power in his words. "But your respect must be shown. Step forward." John's legs felt like lead. He took one trembling step, then another. His mind screamed to flee, to say no, but somehow, his body obeyed the pull of the ceremony. Every Lithirian guest's eyes followed him, their expressions unreadable yet intense. He could feel the silent judgment, the quiet expectation that he would rise to this moment or fail spectacularly. Solara extended her hand toward him. The gesture was simple, but it carried weight he had not expected. He took it tentatively, and in that touch, he felt a spark of connection, a hint that maybe he was not completely alone in this strange new world. For a brief moment, fear mingled with a strange excitement, a sense that, despite everything, this was a story unlike anything he had ever imagined. John looked out over the alien court, the floating lanterns shimmering like distant stars, the crystalline architecture reflecting soft, ethereal light, and realized he was standing at the edge of something extraordinary. He did not know if he could succeed, but he knew one thing. This was his life now, and there was no turning back. The world around him seemed vast, strange, and impossibly beautiful, and in the center of it all, he was a human, trembling but alive, caught in a moment that would change him forever. After the initial shock of the king's declaration, John was escorted to a quiet garden within the palace. The area was unlike any garden on earth. The ground glowed faintly under his feet, and flowers shimmered with colors that seemed to pulse with life. Trees bent gracefully in impossible shapes, their leaves reflecting the green sky above. Small glowing creatures floated lazily around, adding a dreamlike feel to the scene. The air smelled sweet, almost like honey mixed with mint, and it calmed John's racing heart just a little. Solara walked beside him, her hand brushing against his only occasionally. She seemed calm, almost detached, yet her presence carried a quiet authority. John tried to speak, but words failed him. Finally, she stopped and turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "You look overwhelmed," she said softly, her voice translating perfectly through his device. "I imagine this is not what you expected when you traveled to Litheria." "No," John said, shaking his head. I don't even know where to begin. I came as a guest, not a participant. I can't possibly. I'm just human. I don't belong here." He exhaled sharply, frustration and fear mixing in a storm he could hardly control. "You can't expect me to marry a princess of your people. I don't understand your customs. I don't." Solara placed a hand on his arm, and her touch sent an odd warmth through him. "It is true," she said gently, "that humans are different from Lithirians. Your ways, your customs, your world, it is far removed from ours. But the king's decision is not an insult. It is a choice of the stars, one that happens only when certain celestial alignments appear. You were chosen, John. Not as a joke, not as a trick. Chosen. John swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. Chosen for what? He asked quietly. To stand beside me, she replied simply. To participate in a ceremony that binds our people. To represent the courage, the resilience, and the heart of your species. She studied him carefully, as if searching for the spark of understanding. It is not an easy task, and I will not pretend it is. But I will help you. You do not need to know everything now. John stared at her, conflicted. The fear inside him was strong, but beneath it, a flicker of curiosity began to burn. Could he really do this? Could a human, fragile and untested in alien ways, earn respect in a world so unlike his own? He thought of Earth, of the small victories humans achieved every day despite limitations, despite danger, despite fear. Could that stubborn human spirit be enough here? I don't know if I can, he admitted honestly. I don't know if I can honor your traditions or be what your people expect. Solara smiled faintly, a gesture soft and kind, though still formal. You do not need to be perfect. No one does. I will guide you, and the ceremony will respect your limits. What matters is your willingness to try, your sincerity, and your heart. That is enough. For the first time, John felt a strange calm wash over him. The panic that had consumed him since the king's declaration began to ease, replaced by a tentative sense of hope. Perhaps he could do this, not perfectly, not easily, but genuinely. Perhaps humans were capable of more than he had imagined. Even here among beings so advanced, so disciplined, so different from him, he looked at Solara, at her serene, patient gaze, and saw a flicker of something deeper. It was trust or perhaps curiosity. Perhaps both. And for the first time, he thought maybe he could rise to this challenge. Not because he was powerful or skilled, but because he was human, flawed, determined, and unwilling to give up when faced with something extraordinary. I'll try, he said finally, his voice steadying. I'll try to honor this. To honor you. Solara nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. That is all I ask, she said softly. Step by step, we will face this together. John exhaled, letting the tension drain from his body. The garden around them seemed brighter somehow, alive with promise. He realized that the journey ahead would be difficult. Strange and unlike anything he had ever imagined, but maybe, just maybe, it was also the beginning of something incredible. The next few days were overwhelming for John. He was no longer a casual visitor. He was a participant in a world that felt both breathtaking and intimidating. The palace halls stretched higher than any building he had ever seen on Earth. Light reflected off, the crystalline walls in dazzling patterns. And every turn seemed to reveal something impossible: floating fountains, glowing staircases, gardens that hummed with life. At first, he felt out of place, like a small shadow among giants, a human trying to move through a world that seemed to follow rules he could barely understand. Solara took it upon herself to guide him. She began patiently teaching him the basics of Litherian etiquette, speech, and even small gestures that could show respect or loyalty. John struggled at first. His hands shook while trying to perform the ceremonial bow. His words stumbled when repeating Litherian phrases, and the subtle expressions that communicated respect or humility escaped him entirely. But Solara never laughed, never scolded. Instead, she observed, corrected, and encouraged. Her patience was steady, and slowly, John realized that learning here wasn't just about memorizing rules. It was about understanding intention, thoughtfulness, and honor. John also began to notice the people around him. The Litherians were not cold, as he had feared. Their precision, their calm movements, their glowing eyes, all of it suggested discipline, but behind it was a warmth he had not expected. Children played in the palace gardens, their laughter musical and light, and elders spoke with patience, their words measured yet kind. He watched servants and advisors move with silent cooperation, their work filled with dignity and pride. It was unlike Earth, but it was not without heart. During one lesson in the ceremonial halls, Solara took him by the hand. Do not fear failure, she said softly. Litherians respect effort, sincerity, and courage. Even a human can earn that respect if they show heart. John looked into her eyes and saw no mockery, no expectation of perfection, only calm encouragement. For the first time, he felt the beginnings of confidence. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he could earn a place here, even if only through persistence and honesty. He practiced daily, repeating gestures, phrases, and vows. At first, the court watched silently, their gaze heavy and assessing. Sometimes John tripped over words, misstepped, or bowed incorrectly, but each time Solara gently corrected him. Slowly, the court's disapproval softened into quiet acceptance. John realized that his humanity, his flaws, awkwardness, and persistence was not a weakness here. It was proof of determination, a trait the Lithrians respected, even if they did not always express it openly. One evening, as the twin suns set over the glowing city, John and Solara walked along a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. He marveled at the view, rivers of light winding through crystal towers, glowing plants swaying gently in the breeze, and distant mountains floating in midair. John felt a strange sense of belonging he had never known. He was human, yes, but he was learning, adapting, and connecting to this alien world in a way that surprised him. "I never imagined I could learn so much in so little time," John admitted quietly. "Everything here. It's beautiful, but also intimidating. I feel like I'm trying to become something I'm not." Solara smiled, her expression soft. "You are becoming who you are meant to be. Not a Lithirian, not a perfect being. Just you. That is what matters. You do not need to erase yourself. You need only show respect, courage, and heart. That is enough for our people to see you as worthy." John thought about that. On Earth, he had often felt small, insignificant, lost in the crowd. Here, he felt the same fear, but also the possibility that being human meant more than survival. It meant courage, adaptation, and connection. Slowly, he began to feel that he could rise to the challenge. Not because he was perfect, but because he was human, persistent, sincere, and willing to learn. As the stars rose above the pale green sky, John realized something profound. He was no longer a mere guest. He was part of this world, standing on the edge of something extraordinary. And with Solara by his side, guiding him, he felt ready to face whatever the coming days would bring. The day of the ceremony arrived faster than John had imagined. The palace buzzed with activity as Lithrians prepared for the grand event. He had learned much in the past days: ceremonial bows, the proper way to speak, even the subtle gestures that demonstrated respect and honor, but fear still twisted in his stomach. Today, all of that would be put to the test. Every move, every word, every expression would be watched by the king, the nobles, and the entire court. The thought was terrifying. As he dressed in ceremonial robes, shimmering and ornate, John felt their weight not only on his shoulders, but on his very humanity. He was a human trying to fit into a world so far beyond his understanding. He caught his reflection in a polished wall, a man who looked out of place, awkward in beauty and grace that he had never known. A quiet voice in his mind whispered that he was not enough, that he could never meet their expectations. Solara approached him, her expression calm but serious. "Do not let fear control you," she said softly. "Even if you stumble, even if you fail in small ways, sincerity carries more weight than perfection. The court will see your heart if you show it truly." John nodded, swallowing hard. Her words steadied him, but only slightly. He knew this was not just a test of etiquette, it was a test of character, courage, and resolve. As they entered the grand hall, the murmurs of the assembled nobles reached him. Some faces were curious, some skeptical, and a few carried thinly veiled disdain. Whispers floated through the air. "A human? Really? How can he honor our customs? Is this a mockery?" The doubts of the court clashed with John's own inner fears, and for a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake simply by stepping forward. The king's eyes bore into him as he took his place beside Solara. The ceremony began, a complex blend of music, words, and gestures that John had practiced tirelessly. His palms were sweaty, and his heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo in the vast hall. He stumbled slightly over the pronunciation of the first phrase, and a faint murmur ran through the crowd. Panic surged, but Solara's hand touched his, a quiet grounding presence. "Keep your focus," she whispered. "You can do this." John took a deep breath and forced himself to slow his racing mind. He remembered everything he had learned, every lesson, every correction, every patient smile from Solara. Slowly, deliberately, he repeated the next phrases, performed each gesture with sincerity, and let his intention carry him through. The court watched silently, their judgment heavy but shifting. It was not perfect, but it was honest. The whispers began to fade as the ceremony progressed. The king observed him intently, and then, subtly, John noticed the corners of the king's eyes soften. It was a small acknowledgement, almost imperceptible, but it filled John with quiet determination. Even the skeptical nobles seemed to take notice of his effort. The way a human, fragile and uncertain, could stand tall when guided by honesty and courage. When the final vow approached, John felt a surge of resolve. He could not fail, not just for himself, not just for Solara, but for the message it carried, that humanity, though small in the universe, could rise to challenges that seemed impossible. He met Solara's gaze, and in her eyes, he found quiet trust. That trust became his anchor. He spoke the vow clearly, every word deliberate, every gesture sincere. Silence followed for a heartbeat, the court waiting, the world holding its breath. Then, slowly, the king nodded. A subtle cheer began to ripple through the hall, a quiet acknowledgement that this human, despite all odds, had earned their respect. John exhaled, relief and pride mingling in his chest. For the first time, he realized that courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. And humans, small and fragile though they might seem, could shine in ways even the most advanced civilizations could not ignore. The ceremony moved toward its peak, and John felt a strange combination of exhaustion and exhilaration. Hours of practice, fear, and self-doubt had led to this moment. He was no longer the trembling human from days ago. Standing beside Solara, he could feel the respect and quiet trust of the Lithirian court. Every glance, every gesture, and every vow had carried his sincerity. He realized with a surge of pride that he had not only survived the test, but had begun to earn his place in this alien world. The king's eyes were fixed on him, assessing, judging, yet there was now a hint of something else: pride, perhaps, or approval. The nobles had stopped their murmurs, replaced by quiet observation, as if they too were realizing that John's human heart carried more than they had expected. Even the skeptical voices that had whispered doubts earlier seemed to fade under the weight of truth. A human, fragile in form but strong in courage, could stand among Lithirians and command their respect. Solara's hand rested lightly on his, grounding him. "You've done well," she said softly, her voice translating clearly through his device. "I knew you could." Her eyes held warmth he had not fully noticed before, a connection deeper than ceremony, deeper than expectation. John felt a surge of emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and something new, belonging. As the final words of the ceremony were spoken, John performed the last gestures with careful precision, his sincerity shining through each movement. The room fell into a reverent silence, every Lithirian observing the conclusion. Then, slowly, the king extended his hand toward John, a gesture of recognition, of acceptance. John took it, feeling the weight and warmth of approval that no human accolade could match. He realized that in this moment, he had bridged worlds, not through power, not through wealth, but through courage, humility, and heart. The court erupted in a subtle but powerful cheer. It was not loud, like an earthly celebration, but profound and meaningful. Lithirians bowed, nodded, and gestured in acknowledgement of John's effort. He felt the magnitude of what had happened. A human, an ordinary, uncertain human, had earned a place among beings centuries more advanced, had honored their traditions, and had shown that humanity was capable of courage and sincerity that transcended difference. John exhaled, a smile spreading across his face. He looked at Solara, who returned his gaze with a quiet, radiant smile. They were not just groom and bride in a ceremony, they were partners facing a world together. He felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also the thrill of possibility. The fear that had gripped him since the king's declaration was gone, replaced by determination and quiet confidence. The king's voice broke the momentary silence. "You have honored us, human," he said. The words carried weight, reverence, and approval. "You have shown courage where many would falter. You have represented your people with heart and sincerity. For that, you are welcome among us." John felt something swell in his chest. It was not just pride, it was the recognition that humans, small and fragile though they might be, could stand among the stars and leave a mark. As the ceremony ended, John and Solara stepped onto the palace balcony. Lanterns floated gently into the pale green sky, glowing like captured stars. The city below shimmered in a quiet, ethereal beauty. John felt a connection not only to Solara but to this world, to its people, and to the possibilities that lay ahead. Humanity, he realized, was more than survival. It was courage, resilience, and the willingness to stand tall when the world expected you to falter. Solara squeezed his hand gently. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "We will have much to face, but we will do it together." John nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. For the first time, he understood that being human did not mean weakness, It meant heart, determination, and the ability to rise above fear. Even among the most alien and advanced beings in the galaxy, the stars began to twinkle in the Lithirian sky, reflected in John's eyes. And in that moment, he knew he had found not only acceptance, but belonging, proof that humanity could shine, even in worlds beyond imagination. The ceremony had ended, but John's journey was only beginning. Standing beside Solara on the balcony, overlooking the glowing city, he felt the strange, powerful mixture of relief, pride, and wonder. Lanterns floated slowly into the pale green sky, drifting like tiny stars carrying messages of hope and celebration. The city shimmered in soft light, the towers and gardens reflecting the surreal beauty of Litheria. For the first time, John felt that he truly belonged, not just as a visitor, but as a participant, a partner, and a bridge between two worlds. Solara squeezed his hand gently. "The court respects you now," she said. "But more importantly, I do." Her eyes held warmth and trust, and for the first time, John realized that the bond between them was not simply ceremonial. It was real. It had begun in curiosity, in patience, and in courage, and it had grown stronger with each shared step. He smiled, a smile of disbelief and quiet joy. Humanity, small and fragile as it seemed, had earned its place here. As they stepped back inside, the palace corridors hummed with life. The nobles who had whispered doubts earlier now bowed in respect, acknowledging his effort and sincerity. Even the king, who had seemed so imposing, gave him a nod of approval that made John's chest swell with pride. He realized that courage was not about being the strongest or the most skilled. It was about stepping forward, even when fear threatened to paralyze you. He had done that, and in doing so, he had shown the Lithrians what humans were capable of. Later, in a private chamber, John and Solara sat together, reflecting on the day. The room was filled with soft light from floating orbs, and the gentle hum of the palace felt almost like a heartbeat. "Do you feel like you belong yet?" Solara asked, tilting her head slightly. John thought for a moment. "I'm human," he said slowly. "I don't know if I'll ever fully understand Litheria. But I know this. I've been accepted here, not because I'm perfect, but because I've tried. Because I cared. And that makes me feel like I belong." Solara smiled, her expression tender. "That is enough," she said softly. "It has always been enough. You have heart, John. That is what matters most." John felt a warmth spread through him. A quiet confidence he had never known on Earth. The journey that had begun as a simple travel adventure had turned into something extraordinary. He had faced fear, doubt, and the unknown. And he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected to Solara, to Litheria, and to his own humanity. In the days that followed, John explored the planet in new ways. He learned more about the culture, the history, and the people. Each day brought challenges, but also laughter, discovery, and deeper understanding. He found joy in teaching Solara about Earth, just as she had patiently taught him about Lithirian life. Together, they bridged worlds not with power, but with respect, curiosity, and shared experience. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, John looked out over the glowing forests and floating mountains. He felt a profound sense of peace. Humanity had always been small, fragile, and underestimated, but standing here, among the stars and beside Solara, he realized that being human also meant courage, resilience, and the ability to connect across differences. That was a power no alien technology or civilization could match. Solara leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. John nodded, feeling the truth of her words in every fiber of his being. Their journey together, and the journey of humanity in this vast galaxy, was just beginning. And for the first time in his life, John felt not only part of something greater than himself, but capable of shaping it. Humanity had arrived in Litheria not as conquerors, not as spectators, but as equals, standing with courage, heart, and hope. And as the stars sparkled above the alien city, John knew that the future, though unknown, was theirs to embrace together.